Thank you, Madam Chair, and to the ranking member. Appreciate the subcommittee taking up the bills on the agenda today. I would like to address three of them that I am co-sponsoring. The first is S 4310, which is the Chugach Alaska Land Exchange and Oil Spill Recovery Act. As most will remember, 1989, one of the worst environmental disasters in history occurred with the Exxon Valdez oil spill, and that spill devastated the Chugach region on many levels, not just environmentally, but socially and economically. The government recovery efforts, though well-intentioned, also had negative impacts and did not always include the voices of the Alaska Native people who had stewarded these lands for millennia. The people of this region and the environment are still recovering 35 years later. In 2019, I added a provision to the Dingell Act to require the Interior Department, in coordination with Forest Service and in consultation with Chugach Alaska, the regional corporation, to analyze the impacts of the oil spills and the government recovery efforts in the region. And this included the Exxon Valdez Oil Spill Trustee Council, which spent nearly 75% of a $900 million civil settlement fund to acquire 650,000 acres of land as protected habitat, approximately 241,000 acres of which were removed from Native ownership. Placing these lands in federal ownership and then in restricted status for habitat protection and conservation effectively prohibits Chugach from taking steps to develop its subsurface interests under these same lands. These actions also significantly reduce Native ownership and voices in the region, and thus Chugach cannot fully realize the economic benefits of their entitlements under ANCSA. So my bill directs a fair land exchange between Chugach, Alaska, and the federal government that addresses that report's findings, permanently conserves the oil spill program lands, and provides Chugach and its shareholders a fair resolution of their ANCSA claims. The next bill is S 3617, the Cape Fox Land Entitlement Finalization Act. This bill waives an existing statutory requirement in ANCSA that restricted Cape Fox Corporation from making selections within 6 miles of the boundary of the city of Ketchikan to allow for the conveyance of the surface estate to a 180-acre tract in the Tongass National Forest. Conveyance of this tract would allow Cape Fox to consolidate its land holdings in the area and ultimately connect the Mahoney Lake hydropower site to the Beaver Falls power grid. And then the final bill is one which Senator Lee just mentioned, which Senator Sullivan is leading on. This is S 3790, the Alaska Native Vietnam Era Veterans Land Allotment Extension and Fulfillment Act, and I don't think there is an acronym, but we should probably come up with one. Senator Sullivan and I worked to include in the Dingell Act in 2019 a new program to enable Alaska Native Vietnam vets to finally select the land allotments they missed out on while serving their country. But unfortunately, we had partisan objections to making certain lands available for selection during our 2019 process. And as a direct result of that, far, far too many of our veterans have been unable to select allotments in their region. So this bill would open up for selection Fish and Wildlife refuge lands identified by Fish and Wildlife Service and require the Forest Service to similarly identify lands for selection. I am disappointed that the Forest Service as an agency and others have pushed back on identifying Forest Service lands for selections, particularly in an administration that claims to be on the side of Native peoples. All I say is that this is your chance to prove it here. In Southeast Alaska alone, there are about 500 Alaska Native veterans who have not filed for allotments because there are no lands whatsoever where they live available for selection. If you live in Angoon, and I heard this just this weekend, you don't want your Native allotment in Tok. This is hundreds of miles across the state of Alaska. It makes no sense, great personal expense, directly away from your ancestral homelands to lands that you don't know and you don't have any ties to. What we're asking for is that there be a reasonable solution here. These veterans want lands that they have hunted and fished on for millennia. They deserve it, and it would amount to a very small part of the overall land base. Lastly, the bill extends the existing program for another 5 years, as it has taken far too long to even identify the eligible veterans and get applications started. We're not on track to do right by them in time under the current program, so we need to extend it. All three of these bills right wrongs for Alaska Native peoples and are well supported. I'm hopeful that we can move them quickly through the committee and the Senate. And I thank the chairman and the ranking member.